Hello, everyone. My name is Christopher Thomas. I work for the Lancaster County Housing and Redevelopment Authorities, where my title is Data and Compliance Analyst. I am partly responsible for managing Lancaster County's Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS, which we locally call Empower Lancaster, or EL. Right. So as this video goes on, we'll be using those terms interchangeably. HMIS and EL, they mean the same thing locally. The purpose of this video is to explain the steps that you will follow in Empower Lancaster to get clients enrolled in the Lancaster County Coordinated Entry System. Before we jump into that, just some quick background. What are we doing here? Who are you? Why are we doing this? This video is intended for people who are completing coordinated entry enrollments for clients who are homeless, either over the phone, in person, or virtually. You may work for possibly United Way, you may work for a homeless service provider, you may work for a community hub. You all share the goal of getting clients the highest level of service to resolve their episode of homelessness that you can, right? The coordinated entry system is the method that we use, and every other county in the state does this too, that allows people who need service to get prioritized for service. The reason we do that is that there are more people seeking service than we have the capacity to serve. We need some way that will be fair across the entirety of the county to everyone seeking service. The coordinated entry system is the tool we use to accomplish that. What the coordinated entry system is the enrollment in Empower Lancaster, that's certainly part of it, the assessments that tell us a bit about the client seeking service, and a prioritization score via the prioritization tool or housing assessment tool. Those are all things that we need in order to get clients onto the county's by name list, which you also will probably hear me use once or twice in the course of this video. By name list is more or less what it sounds like. It is a list of all of the people currently experiencing homelessness who are seeking service in the county. We want to have a, like I said, equitable way of approaching this tremendous need that lets the people who have the greatest needs, who are most vulnerable, get the highest level of service we can get to them. You will follow along with me as I take you through the steps in Empower Lancaster. Unfortunately, is not a simple kind of 1, 2, 3, and that's why you're looking at this steps to follow on screen. Now, this isn't going to stay on screen, but this will be a recorded video, so you can refer back to this later if you want to treat this kind of as a workflow or like a decision tree about what to do. The reason I have these steps here and broadly why are we doing this is to try to eliminate any kind of duplication of service if we can, right? So the first steps we're going to look at together will be determining if that client already has an open coordinated entry enrollment. Because if that is the case, the steps you take will look different than a person who does not have a coordinated entry enrollment or who has an old coordinated entry enrollment, right? So the point here is to try and work together, even though we're working together all across the county. A real possibility would be that a person walks into your service location seeking homeless services. You say, great, I'd love to get you on the by name list, right? But that person within the last 90 days also called 211, talked to an operator at United Way, and they might already have an enrollment. So because Empower Lancaster is a shared system, all you would need to do then is to update that enrollment with anything that's changed. On the other hand, if they're not, you'll create a new enrollment for that person and possibly even create that person kind of from scratch in Empower Lancaster. What we seek to do here is to walk you through these steps so that you can kind of follow the same workflow every time and hopefully get the same results, right? The thing you'll need to start will be access to Empower Lancaster, right? So you'll need your Empower Lancaster user ID, your Empower Lancaster password, and you'll need the URL for Empower Lancaster. Because Empower Lancaster is a web-based application. We use a web browser. I use Chrome for this to access it. So in a second here, we're going to be jumping over to Empower Lancaster on the shared screen, and you'll be following along as I follow these steps. So, and also just background really quick, we're just going to be looking at test clients. This will be a recorded video, so we won't be looking at any live client data. It will just be my test client, Christopher. So nothing on here is going to be actual client data. So we kind of working in those boundaries. So like I have here, the place we're always going to start will be going to Empower Lancaster in a web browser and logging in. Now, I strategically looked up Christopher last. Christopher Thomas is my test client, right? But I'll follow the steps as though I was looking at someone else, right? You're going to start by doing find client, and then you're going to use last, first, and if possible, birth date to try and determine if that client is already in Empower Lancaster. This will just give you kind of an idea of what your starting point is, right? So unless I'm mistaken, Christopher's birth date is January 1, 1970, and his name is Christopher, C-H-R, Thomas, T-H-O. So when I click search, because I've given it specific search criteria, it is going to take me straight to Christopher's record. But potentially, let's say I didn't give it a birth date. I just gave it T-H-O-C-H-R. You can think of many other names that would satisfy those criteria. Christine Thompson, Christopher Tomlinson would all come up because we didn't give it very specific criteria. So we're not going to do this because I don't want to pull up those clients. But in the table that would appear, you could use either birth date or social security number to differentiate. Again, this is just trying to determine if that person's already in Empower Lancaster. So what we're going to do here is we're going to search and we're going to find Christopher. And because only one person meets these criteria, we're going to go straight to Christopher. So that's checkbox 1, right? Is the client in Empower Lancaster already? Yes. Okay, that's the first checkpoint. The next checkpoint, or the next kind of divergence point maybe, is this person already open in coordinated entry? Meaning, what task is set to me here? Am I going to create a new enrollment for them? Am I going to reopen an enrollment for them? Am I going to create a brand new one? This will all be told or all be shown to us by going to the client record and then going to case management. See here my mouse is jiggling here. Case management, program enrollment. So we searched the client, we found the client, we went to case management and then program enrollment. So I teed this up, but you'll see here that Christopher does have coordinated entry system enrollments. In fact, he's got 2. Now, why is that possible? Because this system has been in place for over 10 years, right? And nothing ever gets lost. So you could possibly see coordinated entry system enrollments from 2017, right? It's a real possibility. The point, the divergence point here is going to be to see, does Christopher have an open enrollment, a recently closed enrollment, or neither? Christopher does not have an open enrollment. So we're not going to be able to kind of replicate that. But if he did, you would see the word, rather than exited, enrolled. What I see here is 2 closed enrollments, 2 exited enrollments. So again, stepping back, the steps are going to look pretty similar for these 2 possibilities, right? If the Christopher already has an existing enrollment or a coordinated entry system enrollment, all that we need to do is check on his assessments, update them if they need to be updated, and then add a service. So we're going to go back to the list I made here. If the client is there, update it as needed and add a service to keep them active. I try not to do too many sidebars here, but active just means that that person has had a service entered recently. That tells the system this person is still actively seeking assistance. They should not be treated as inactive and closed automatically. We want to keep them open. If they have a closed CE enrollment, we're going to have another kind of branch point here, right? Christopher does have closed CE enrollments. He's got 2. The next thing we're going to check is, does he have a CE enrollment that is closed for less than 90 days? Because that means it's recent and we can reuse it. We don't have to create a new one. There's no reason for us to create kind of more of these than we need. And the rule we're using right now is 90 days. So I see Christopher has got 2 closed enrollments, and under his program entry exit date column, I see his enrollment date and his close date, enrollment date, close date. So this one here I can see is much older than 90 days. Just back of the envelope math, 90 days ago, if today is 5/13/26, would be about 2/13/26, 3 months ago. Well, this one's we're getting on 2 years old. So this one we cannot reuse. So we're just going to ignore it. It's in the past. But this one here was closed on 2/28/2026, which is more recent than 90 days old. I don't know how many exactly, but it's newer than that. In this case, we can reopen that enrollment by clicking on the word exited and then reopen enrollment. And I'm going to do that now. So now what changed? This changed to open. So his enrollment is no longer closed on 2/28/26. And this changed from exited to enrolled. So now we have accomplished one of the things we want to get done for a client in this situation, which is that we've got a new, or sorry, not new, an old, but an open coordinated entry system enrollment, right? So that was the first thing we wanted to do in this situation. The next one we want to do, there's 2 more steps really. One is to check that client's assessments to see what might have changed since he was last assessed. Because here, Christopher was enrolled on 9/9/25, which is a good long time ago. So this is telling me that he was likely engaged, meaning someone was monitoring his status and entering services for him, keeping his record up to date, but either that person closed him because he was no longer seeking service, or he disengaged, or his record went inactive and it was closed automatically, right? The simplest way to do this would just be to click on the word enrolled and then click on the words view assessments. So I want to find Christopher, he's my client's at entry assessment. And there I see it was 9/9/25. So I'm going to click on this. In a second, this will load. And now I'm looking at all of the assessments that were created for Christopher at entry, meaning when he was enrolled in this program. This on the left here is a navigation bar that I can use to jump to different screens or different assessments. The first one I have here is housing assessment tools. This is Christopher's HAT or prioritization tool. You'll notice I can't change these, but I can see what his answers were in September of 2025. So, for example, in the past 30 days, had Christopher spent most nights in a place not meant for habitation? Yes. How long had his household been living on the street or in a shelter continuously? 1 year or longer. How many months total had they been homeless in the last 30 years? 3 years rather, more than 12 months, etc. So if anything here changed, and really more specifically working with things that are changing kind of for the worse, for the more severe, to show greater vulnerability, we would want to go and edit those, and I'll show you how in a second. The same goes for these other assessments. HUD universal data will be that client's disabling condition status. So do they have a disability and their homeless state? Those may have changed. I would say most likely they will not have. People may have been in and out of shelter, for example, but probably we're going to be talking about people who have been experiencing more or less continuous homelessness. HUD program data would be specific information about clients' disabilities, non-cash benefits. These could all potentially change and might need to be edited. Finances is the HUD financial assessment. Christopher here has no financial resources, but that may have changed. He may have gained income since September of 2025. We can change that. And his health insurance status may have changed. Christopher had no yeses. You'd see yes here if he had any insurance. So what I'm going to do here is use my imagination. We're going to imagine that something on Christopher's assessment tool has changed, and I'll show you how to change that for this now open enrollment, because I want it to be up to date. I'm going to close this window by clicking the word close down here in the bottom right, and then close this assessments window. And then I'm going to go to the actual assessments button over here. Now there's two places I might want to go. One is HUD, and this will show us where those HUD assessments are in case any of those need to change. Now, I have not planned this super strategically, right? So I didn't think too far ahead. We're just going to imagine that Christopher's finances need to change, right? But you see also his HUD Universal is here, HUD program is there, financial assessments here. So let's say Christopher's finances have changed. I want to update his financial assessment. Why do I want to do that? I want to do that so that the next organization that serves him to try and resolve his episode of homelessness has the most up-to-date information it can get. When I click on this, you'll see Christopher has got many enrollment or assessments rather, because he's a test client who we're always enrolling different places, right? But you'll notice here, the first row, there's that coordinated entry system at entry enrollment, or rather assessment, I'm sorry, from 9/9/2025, where he had $0 income. That's what I want to update. So I'm going to click on this, which is a button. See how my mouse changes from a clicker to a finger? Click on this, that assessment loads. And now, if I need to, I can change Christopher's income from any source from no to yes. We'll imagine that Christopher has gained some biweekly income. Now, if I save this, I will have updated that assessment under Christopher's coordinated entry enrollment. That number has changed. Could also imagine that the opposite happens. Christopher came in originally with some income. Now he has no income. Well, just reset our minds here. Imagine we're starting with this point. We want to change this assessment, income from any source, yes, to income from any source, no. Save no income. And now we got $0. The other thing you will, and even more likely need to change, will be in assessments, housing assessment tool. Now, Christopher hasn't got as many of these, he's only got one, and given that this was kind of brought online in July 2025, that makes sense. We can edit this by clicking again on the date, which is a link, and any answers in here that need to change can be changed. Now, example of this that really should change is Christopher is, I think he's 56. He's not actually age 24 years or younger. So this should actually be a no. And you'll notice that recalculated his score. Youth, there's an extra point for youth heads of house. Christopher is not a youth head of house. But let's take another example here that would increase Christopher's score. How many members of the household suffer from one or more of the following disabling conditions? Substance use disorder, mental health disorder, developmental disability, chronic health condition, HIV/AIDS, or physical disability. Well, right now it says none. But I know, if you'll bear with me, based upon Christopher's HUD program assessment from his coordinated entry system at entry, I know that he did report disabling conditions. He reported drug use disorder, mental health disorder. So that actually should be a yes, right? Christopher's getting lower priority score than he should. So let's go back to assessments, housing assessment tool, and update that. So this right here, how many members? Well, it's not none, it's one. And now this has changed again. Right? So if I save that, now Christopher's prioritization score on the by name list will change the next time that gets run. Okay. The last thing you would want to do, and again, taking now 10 steps back, is when you've got a person who is already in Empower Lancaster and either already has an open coordinated entry system enrollment or has one that you could reopen, right? So you haven't had to create a new one. All you did was verified their responses. The last thing that you want to do every time is to enter a service under that enrollment. So to enter that service, to signal to Empower Lancaster that this person is, sorry. So to enter that service, to signal to Empower Lancaster that this person is still actively seeking service, we're going to go to the case management menu to accomplish that. Now, many of you might already be familiar with the services menu. This is what we use to kind of keep quantitative track of how many dollars, how much time, how many times things happened under different programs. I'm going to ask you to take a little bit of a left turn with me here, and we're actually going to use the next option up in the menu. That is current living situation. What we're meant to be doing in this program, in addition to assessing people and prioritizing them for service, is keeping track of how people's living situations might change as they're waiting for service. That at entry assessment won't tell us that. That tells us what their situation was before they were enrolled. And in Christopher's case, he was enrolled in September, right? So almost a whole year has passed. A lot might have changed. What this screen lets us do, current living situation, is tell the system by clicking on Add New, not just that this person had a service and the date that service was entered, but also what their current situation is. So I'm going to leave this to today's date, which will be the default. It's May 13. The program will be coordinated entry system. And again, we know Christopher has that open and coordinated entry system enrollment because we reopened it. Current living situation, we can select from a drop-down. It's the same list of situations that you would get at an entry assessment. There's homeless situations, institutional situations, temporary situations, permanent situations. Now, I would not expect that a client is in a permanent situation and is seeking homeless services because this would signal that they are not homeless, right? The thing that's more likely going to be happening would be a person coming to us in a place of interhabitation and now being in shelter or vice versa. So in Christopher's case, let's imagine that he is in shelter right now. That's his current living situation. Living situation verified by lets us search for the program. We're going to do it under the coordinated entry system. We, in the coordinated entry system, verified this. Then all that remains for us to do is to pick a service, and we'll just use case management and a number of units. We can choose the number 1. So now when we save this, we've created a new current living situation for Christopher under the coordinated entry system. On this date, Christopher was in an emergency shelter. Additionally, if we go to Christopher's services list, also in case management, we now see a new service. Now I created this one earlier between cuts, I apologize. We would just see 1 because we created that 1 unit. So that was the last step. Again, reiterating, we logged in, we looked for our client, we found our client, we found that he already had a coordinated entry system enrollment that was closed, but was closed in the last 90 days. We reopened it, we checked his assessments, updated them, And we gave a new current living situation using this button in the case management menu. So for Christopher, this imaginary client, everything is done. We've done everything we can for him. We have updated all this information, put in a service. He now will be on the by name list the next time it gets run because he's active and open in coordinated entry. So that was sort of door one, right? Client already exists, enrollment already exists. What if the client isn't already in Empower Lancaster? I searched last first, I looked for DOB, I tried, who knows, different spellings. I just could not find my client. Or what if I go in and I find something that looks like this? I'm just going to delete these. I went into Christopher's record, and when I went to check his case management program enrollment summary, I didn't see a coordinated entry enrollment. Nothing for me to reopen, nothing for me to update. This is taking us through door two, which is creating a new coordinated entry enrollment. We're going to look at that together too. This will work the same way if the client is already in Empower Lancaster or if they're not. You'll follow the same steps. I'll point out where it'll look a little bit different. The step you'll follow is to click on add/enroll client. Actually, I'm just going to make sure I'm in here as an organization that has access to coordinated entry first. Okay, so I'm going to go add/enroll client, and then I'm going to click the first option, coordinated entry system. I don't want to click express intake. I don't want to click outreach intake. The reason I want to pick coordinated entry system is that this will give me all of the assessments and screens I need to have a complete coordinated entry enrollment. When I click this, a new window pops up. I'm going to close this already existing workflow because it looks like I started doing something for Christopher almost a month ago. So I'm going to close that. I want a new workflow. I'm going to maximize this to get the whole screen. So now what we're working, and if for many of you, this will probably be old hat. You will have enrolled people before, maybe many times before, but we're just going to imagine that you have it. What I'm looking at right now is what we call the enrollment workflow. The enrollment workflow is what is over here on the left side of the screen. We're going to work our way through all of these screens from the top to the bottom to complete this coordinated entry enrollment. You'll notice first thing that I'm looking at a bunch of blank fields. So I was just looking at Christopher, but it is not assuming that Christopher is who I'm enrolling. It will always be a fresh start. And this is the point where things might look a little bit different if the person's already in Empower Lancaster versus if they're not. You'll always start by doing last first. In Christopher's case, I'm going to put in his DOB 2. That part is optional. You're always going to have to at least do last first and then click check for duplicates. This is a required step. Just like a search, like we were doing 10 minutes ago, we just gave it some search criteria. Christopher Thomas, 1/1/1970, and here he is. So this is my client. If I click on him, and I won't do it just yet, everything we already have saved for him will copy over. It's a huge time save for both us and the client. If I don't see the client who I'm looking for, you will have already, if you're following these steps, you will have already tried finding client, right? And you will have been creative, so you will have made sure that you had the right spelling. If you don't have anybody here, that person's not already in Empower Lancaster, and we can think about who's this most likely to be the case for? Younger people or anybody experiencing homelessness for the first time are much less likely to already be in Empower Lancaster, right? So those are some kind of things to watch out for where you might anticipate this being a brand new client to Empower Lancaster, not to the program. What you would do then, if we use our imaginations, and let's just say Christopher, it's a different Christopher. Check for duplicates. Well, there's no Christopher Thomas with that birth date. So I would hit this is a new client. I'm not going to do that because in most cases, and because we are actually doing this for a person who we know is already in the system, what I'll be doing is clicking on that person's row in this table. And when I do that, you'll think for a second, and everything it already has saved will carry over. So that includes name, DOB, SSN. We see here Christopher's got his last four, which is acceptable. His sex, language, relation to the head of household. He's the head of household. He's self. Veteran status, race, his most recent address, his phone number, permissions to text, leave voicemails, call at work are all already saved. So right now, it appears as though the system has everything that it needs. If I click save, I'll move to the next screen and we'll be proceeding down this workflow. But let's use our imaginations. Let's say for whatever reason, Christopher doesn't have something that it needed. When I hit save, it's going to stop me. And this little warning at the top will tell me what I'm missing. I know it's missing and that I have to get it because it has this red star. So Christopher is male, say he's male. We're all set now. When I hit save, oh, sorry, before I move on, this would be your opportunity to update address. The client's address has changed. Update phone number or add a secondary phone or click client has no phone are all possible things you could do. And contact information is much more likely to change than their date of birth, for instance, right? So you might want to check these and make sure that they are up to date because this may be a phone number that someone at a different organization tries to call to contact Christopher and say, hey, it says here that you are homeless and seeking service. I've got a spot in my rapid rehousing program. Can we talk about what that program could do for you? This is really important information. But these things are all self-explanatory, right? So I don't foresee you having any issues updating these fields. And we're going to assume for Christopher's sake that these are all the same. So we're going to save to move on. Okay. Now I'm looking at a question. For the purpose of assessing your housing needs, and we're imagining that I'm saying this to Christopher, whether over the phone or in person, do I have your permission to enter and share your and your family's information into the Lancaster County Homeless Data System? It's very crucial that this be a yes, because unless your organization is also going to provide that service, the next person along, if they're not from your organization, and this record is not shared, they were going to have quite a hard time finding it. And they'll probably come and ask me, and I'll try to help them figure out what happened. But sharing is really a crucial part of this process. When we say sharing, we're not talking about sharing outside of Empower Lancaster, outside of HMIS. We're talking about sharing between different homeless service and community service providers. So that might be an important caveat to add is that when I say I'm going to share your information, I mean with the organizations that are trying to help you. So Christopher has said yes, we're going to save to move on, and now his record is shared. There's another question that pops up. For head of households aged 18 to 24 years old, at the end of this screening, if you'd like me to, I can send a referral to an organization called Valley Youth House. This program may be of additional assistance, including providing case management for those that may be eligible. Yes, I'm interested. No, I'm not interested. But in this case, we're going to look at that or statement. Clients over age 24. Christopher's 56. So this is not going to be an appropriate service for him. We're going to say, no, Christopher is not a youth seeking youth services. Save. Now we're getting into it. This is the add family members table. I see here that Christopher, in addition to himself, he also has got a 2-year-old. I can change this client's information by clicking on this little checkbox and checking the answers I see in here, just like I could have updated Christopher's if needed. You'll notice that here there's a relation to head of house. So this is Christopher's child. That's only going to be relevant for people who aren't the head of house. He'll always be, or they'll always be a self. Secondary members have to have a relation to him to define that. Let's just say hypothetically that I do have his son's social security number. Well, I can change this from client doesn't know to either full if I have 9 digits or approximate if I have anything other than 9 digits. So let's just say look at his last four. I can add that. I could also add a row. If I click add row, what I'm going to get is a new set of blank fields to create a new client. I'm adding a new person to this household. This will be the same process as we use at add new client, where you'll type in first, last, and you'll check for duplicates. This is, again, looking to see if that person's already in Empower Lancaster and should be included in this household. Or if they're not, do I need to click add a new, or this is a new client, and add all of that information. So as you think through this, you can see ways that this might begin to take quite a bit more time. Christopher's a brand new client. I have to ask him for his basic information, contact information, permission to contact him, permission to share his information with other organizations, and then ditto every time I add a household member, right? So it's a 4-member household, they're first time homeless. You're talking about doing that 4 times to create a whole household, right? So when you think about planning for this, make sure you factor in that the larger a household you're enrolling, the more time it's going to take. It's simply not sufficient to say we're enrolling Christopher and +3, right? No, each of those people has to get enrolled separately and have their own assessments done. And the reason is that all of those individuals' information will factor into that overall household situation, right? Earlier this week, I merged 2 clients into a household. One of them had no income, the other one did. Well, I want both of their incomes to be considered when they're seeking services as a household. The only way I can accomplish that is by having both people in the household, both people having their own assessments. It's a long way of saying this can be a pretty thoroughgoing process depending upon how many enrollments you're making. Now, so as to not make this take all day, we're not going to add anyone. We're just going to keep our 2 members, Christopher and his child. And if you're not sure, you can add or remove members later with my help or with Sheldon's help. It's not too challenging to do, but it's a little too convoluted to explain in this video. What we're going to do here is we're going to leave those 2 household members. We don't want to change anything. And it's save to move on. That was the first half. And now starts the second half. We've told it who our clients are. And now we're going to tell it what program we're adding them to. Because I'm in here as United Way, they only have one option. You may have many options if your organization offers many different kinds of services. So you'll need to differentiate and make sure that you pick coordinated entry system to get that person a coordinated entry enrollment. You'll also notice that this automatically shows today's date. That's fine. If you needed to do this backdate, you could, but we're just going to leave it as it is. Now, when I click save, I'm going to move into the assessments portion. Now, before I do that, there's one more really important step. You'll recall we looked at this add family members table. We didn't add any household members, but we did notice that Christopher has another household member. This is the enrollment members screen. This is where I choose the family members I want to include in this enrollment. You'll notice that right now, only one of these 2 checks is dark. One is light, one is dark. This is telling me that Christopher is selected, his child is not. So I do want them both to be enrolled because they are a household. They will be served as a household, and that is not likely to change in the near future. So I'm going to click on that second row, and everything fills in. They have the same begin date. They're both open in the program. Their birth date shows up. Relation to head of house shows up. We've just added that second person. All right, hit save. Now, there's 2 more kind of pieces to go through. One is the housing assessment tool. We're looking at that right now. We are going to get one of these per household. So you will be asking and answering these questions describing the entire household and all of its members. And some of these questions we're going to look at here, it'll be obvious that's what we're talking about. We've got questions about how many people in the household have a disabling condition, right? If a household's got multiple disabled members, that is a high priority for service. I'm actually, in the interest of time, I'm not going to walk through every single one of these questions. I'm gonna answer them so we can move on, because you'll notice they all have red stars. So none of these are optional. They're asking about the household's homeless status, in specific, whether they have been unsheltered, how long they've been in this situation continuously. So let's just say we're using our imaginations here. Christopher's been homeless since September 25, rather. So it's been 90 days or more. How many months he's been homeless in the last 3 years? We'll use our imaginations and say this is his first time. So it's been less than 12 months. How many members of the household suffer from one or more of the following disabling conditions? We'll just say one, just Christopher. Does he feel as though discrimination has kept him from obtaining or retaining housing? He said yes. Is your experience of homelessness the result of interactions with police, jail, prison, or the court system, including evictions? He'll say yes. Has he been hospitalized since becoming homeless? No. Is he the head of House 24 or younger? No. Is he 65 or older? No. Is he pregnant? No. Does he have a child under 4? Yes. And does he have any minors in the household? Yes. Notice that last one didn't change the score. This is just helping us to differentiate, because some programs are for adult households and some are for adult child households. So now I've got these answers filled in. I'm going to hit save to move on. And now I get into the HUD questions. So there's going to be 4 of these per client. So 4 for Christopher, 4 for his child. I'm going to try to go quickly. I'm sure I've already taken forever. So here's the rundown. The HUD Universal is assessing clients' homeless status, meaning before we enrolled them in the program, basically last night, where were they staying? For coordinated entry, we have a few additional questions up here at the top. What is the assessment location, meaning where was this person when the assessment was done? What was the type? So in Christopher's case, he was in shelter. We were doing this, we'll say he's in person. He came into my office. You can leave the assessment level and prioritization status as they are. If that needs to change, you'll receive communication later. Now we're going to ask about where this client has been, starting with clicking on this here, this little search box, which will look up all of the providers in the county. I'm with United Way right now, just to keep things simple. Disabling condition. So does Christopher have a disabling condition? Yes or no? So yes. And then what was his prior living situation? Where was he staying last night? We said that Christopher is in an emergency shelter. How long has he been in that situation? It has been more than 90 days. What was the date his homelessness started? We're just going to say again, it was 9/5/2025. How many times in the last 3 years has he been on the street or in shelter, meaning individual episodes of homelessness that were broken up by leaving the street or leaving shelter? So for example, if Christopher was on the street for 3 months, and then he moved in with friends for a month, and then he went into shelter, those would be 2 separate instances of homelessness, broken up by him entering permanent housing. For Christopher, we're saying this was his first time homeless. So this is one time in the last 3 years. Options go up to 4 or more times. And then what's the total number of months Christopher has been homeless in the last 3 years? Now, again, we said it's been 8 months. Now, why is this important? We talk about coordinated entry and prioritization, prioritizing the highest need, most vulnerable clients. One of the markers we have to measure vulnerability and need is chronic homelessness. To get a little minute aside here to explain chronic homelessness. This assessment's telling us that the client is homeless, and based on this, Christopher was homeless at entry. It's also going to tell us if Christopher is chronically homeless. It's going to do that by using the definition for chronic homelessness that we get from the federal government. And that is a person who is disabled, Christopher is disabled, who has been homeless continuously for more than 12 months. Christopher has not been homeless continuously for more than 12 months. So does not meet the definition. Or has experienced 4 or more episodes of homelessness in the last 3 years, totaling more than 12 months. Christopher also does not meet that part of the chronic homeless definition. Similarly, if Christopher was not disabled, even if he had been homeless for 25 years, he would still not be considered chronically homeless using the federal government's definition. So it's a really important point because we have relatively few chronically homeless people in the county. And because that definition is so stringent, those are really high need clients. They've been homeless for a long time and they suffer a disability. So they should be a really high priority for us. We're going to keep Christopher's answers the same and move on. Next, we're looking at the HUD program assessment. This is asking a variety of questions, including domestic violence status, non-cash benefit status, health insurance status, and then specific disabling conditions. We will say that Christopher is not a survivor of domestic violence. He does not have non-cash benefits, although if we said yes, we'd be expected to tell it which ones. It's a pretty short list. We're really just mostly talking about TANF, SNAP, and WIC, but we'll say no for Christopher. Does this person have health insurance? No. And then which of the specific 6 disabling conditions does he suffer from? Now, I would not expect to see this because a second ago I told the system that Christopher was homeless and disabled. Now I'm telling it that he's not disabled. There's not going to be any kind of logic that checks your work and says, hold on, you told me there he's disabled, now you're telling me he's not. It falls to us to make sure that our answers are consistent, right? So at least one of these should be a yes. We're going to say that Christopher suffers a mental health disorder, and it's going to ask us if that's expected to be of long continued, indefinite duration, and is substantially impairs his ability to live independently. We're going to say yes. Any number of these you can answer yes to, and they'll all, with one exception, have this follow-up question. It's really best just to treat this as a laundry list. Do you suffer from a substance use disorder? Yes, no. Do you suffer from mental health disorder? Yes, no. You at this stage are not expected to get proof, meaning a disability letter, a doctor's note with a diagnostic code. That is something that would fall to a different organization down the line, potentially, if that person goes on to be served by a project where disability and proof of disability is an eligibility criteria. This is taking verbal responses, yeses and nos. And save to move on. Now we see Christopher's finances. We are asked if Christopher has income from any source, and we're just going to say no. But if I tell it yes, I'll be expected to tell it which source of income, and this list should be exhaustive. And then in addition, how frequently, meaning interval, does he get that pay, and how much does he get on that interval, right? So it could be an annualized amount, could be a monthly, a biweekly, a weekly, a daily. It will figure out what that comes to per month based upon the amount and the interval. Christopher has no income, so we're just going to say no and save to move on. Now, finally, we're asked if Christopher, oh, I'm sorry, the logic worked. I told Christopher had no health insurance. It didn't ask about health insurance. If I had said yes, it would have given me a list of health insurance sources. I would have picked yes for one of them. Okay, it's one down. The second person's a child, and it's a little simpler, right? Because these are going to be likely the same. And all we need to get for a child is their disabling condition, yes or no. Their homeless status, because they're a minor, is set by their head of house. So it's assumed that Christopher's child shares his homeless status, shares his length of time homeless, etc. So it makes it a little bit simpler for us. Save to move on. child also has their own program data, which will be a little bit truncated because he's only 2. So it doesn't ask about non-cash benefits because 2-year-olds are not eligible for non-cash benefits, but they are eligible for health insurance. So he's not insured. He does not have any of the following disabling conditions. We're going to hit save. It should skip his financial assessment because, again, 2-year-olds don't have jobs. And now we've got 2 screens left. This should look familiar if you stuck with me because this is the current living situation screen. Same story. Under our coordinated entry system enrollment, we're going to give it his current living situation, tell it who verified that, verified by the coordinated entry system. We're going to enter a case management unit. So now I've created a service for Christopher, as well as an associated location where he was staying. This is going to keep him active. And as long as he continues to have services entered intermittently, he'll stay active in the program and there won't be any problems. But again, rewinding quite a ways here, if he does go inactive and falls out of the program, we can reopen him within 90 days. Save to move on. Now the last screen here should be a referral screen. Okay, sorry for the pause there. Referrals can get made from this screen by clicking on Add New, and then supplying all the required fields, including the organization that you wish to refer to, that referral status. You can use this to create a case note and generate an email to the organization that you're referring to as well. I'm not going to do that now. So I'm just going to click cancel. You can use this to create referrals for that client too. Now, I'm going to click done. Workflow is now complete. This is a summary of all the screens we just worked through, top to bottom, done. And now I'm back where I started, looking at Christopher's program enrollment screen, where it should be. Here we go. So Christopher Thomas has now a coordinated entry system enrollment created on today's date. Follow some of those same steps. We go to case management program enrollment. I can go and look at those assessments. Everything we just supplied is now saved here. And starting from this day forward, as long as Christopher is, again, intermittently having services entered, he'll remain open in this project and he'll appear on the by name list to be prioritized for service. So just to summarize really quick, what we're looking at here was what to do every time. You're going to start by looking that person up, seeing if they're already in Empower Lancaster, and seeing if they already have an open enrollment and coordinated entry. Based upon those, you'll take different steps, like the ones I showed you earlier in the video. Reopen the enrollment if possible, update their assessments if needed, or create a new enrollment or even a new client in a new enrollment if that's merited. You'll work your way through for all of the household members. You'll do a housing assessment tool for all of the household together on a single assessment. And at the end, you'll create a new current living situation, add a service, and add any referrals if needed. If you have any questions, you can pose them to me. Or anything goes wrong in Empower Lancaster, for example, and then Josiah is going to be, helping to manage that list. If you have any questions with this process for the countywide system, Josiah from my office should be able to help field that too. Thank you for your time. I apologize it takes so long, but I wanted to be thorough. Again, any questions, my email address is cthomas@lchra.com. You can send me an email. I'm happy to answer any questions or troubleshoot if you get stuck at any point. Thanks.